Okay. Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I've started the recording. I've got a few questions. What part where it says suggest increase level, what does this mean? Okay, we'll relook at the wording for the practical 5, but we'll come back to at the end of the lecture to the questions about prac 5. Okay. Today, the tutorial is going to focus on composition as mentioned in class yesterday, as it's not something new to you guys. It's just how to implement it. I think it's getting a bit tricky with two classes and how to connect them and how to connect to the form. So what we're going to do is read through the question, do the UML, and then move on to try implement part of it. It is quite a long tutorial. Okay. I'll come back to the questions about the prac at the end. See, I've got a few popping up in chat. Okay. And then we'll sort those out as well today. So the prac is unwritten rule of nature. One must toil away during summertime to ensure they have enough supplies for winter. Unfortunately, Dennis the grasshopper has been a bit slacker, lazing in the sun and living a very life very well. And the winter comes around the corner. He hasn't got enough food, and he decides to crash at the ant colony. Help him decide which of the many ant colonies out of the has been the decide which has been the most hard-working ant colony out of them all. Develop a VB application to assist him in making his decision. So basically, I don't know if you guys know the story of the grasshopper and the ant, but yeah. So the grasshopper's lazy, the ant's a hard worker, gets things done. The grasshopper now wants to know where to crash and steal food from. Begin by creating a class called cant, which has the following attributes: worker ID, unique ID values assigned to worker at initialization. They can be identified by values of 100 and greater. Ants do not have names, so the ID cannot be generated afterwards, cannot be changed afterwards. Weight of the ant, hard-working level of the ant, how hard the ant works between 1 and 10, 10 being make slave drivers happy. It's also the following variables: ID record, an integer value that starts at 99 is used to keep track of the next number in the sequence. Should be used. It is used to allocate worker IDs to cant object, cannot be read or changed directly. Okay. In addition, the necessary property methods and utility methods need to be developed. Determine work ethic returns the ant's hardworking level divided by a random number between the value of 1 and 10. Gathering food returns the amount of food gathered by an ant. Ants are able to carry 7 times their weight. The amount of food they gather is determined by how much they can carry multiplied by their work ethic, see above. A constructor that will set the worker ID, weight, worker and hard worker level at initialization. The corresponding instance variables of hard working level property must be initialized to 0. Instance variable and the instance variable of hard worker, instance variable of worker ID must be -1 if not ID is provided as argument. Let me just read that again. The corresponding instance variable of hard worker level property must be initialized to 0. And the instance variable of worker ID must be -1 if the worker ID is not provided as an argument. That's for the constructor. Get next ID, a class level, non-object level function that increments and returns the value of ID record by 1. So the next time it is called, it will return the next number in the sequence. So if you call it now, it will return 100. You call it a second time, it will return 101. Constructor must be used to initialize the value of ID record. Okay. And then once that's done, we make the ant colony. So it's a lot of confusing terminology here and a lot of working aspects. But worker ID, that's initialized and set to a value between 100 and higher. It cannot be changed afterwards. That's important to keep in mind. The weight of the ant, hard working level, how hard the ant works between 1 and 10, 10 being the highest, yes. Underscore ID rec, an integer value starting at 99 is used to track the values in the sequence. Any idea what type of variable this ID record, sorry, the ID record is going to be? Good. Okay, yes. Popping up in chat. Shared. The ID record is shared. Okay. Also, does it have a property method? No. How do we know that? Good. Okay, it's important to keep looking for those terminologies in your practicals as well. Right now in the practice, we're not too focused on read-only, write-only. We're more focused on your ability to do composition and just get the composition to work. Later on, we'll start focusing on these type of things as well. So keep in mind when doing practicals, make sure you read and understand what's going on. The fact that it cannot be read or changed directly means it is a private variable with no property method. Okay, in addition, you have the additional methods or functions. Also notice utility methods. So some of these might be private. Determine work ethic returns returns the ant's hard working level divided by a random value between 1 and 10. So we generate that. Gather food, that's the weight times 7 multiplied by work ethic. Okay, the constructor will set the worker ID, weight, and hard worker at initialization. The corresponding instance variable for hard working level property must be initialized to 0 at the instance, and the instance variable for worker ID must be -1 if no worker ID is provided as an argument. Okay. Everyone okay with that point? Does the constructor make sense? And crap. I just realized this. Okay, there's a way around that. That'll look. Yeah, it sounds a bit more confusing than it is worth. Your constructor will set the worker ID, the weight, and hard working level. Remember, hard working level is a value is the value between 1 and 10. Okay. So we're going to give the worker ID, which is actually generated, the weight, the worker hard worker level. Well, hard worker level again is what we enter. Okay. Um, the corresponding instance variables for worker ID must be initialized to 0 instance variable. Are the corresponding instance variables of hard worker level property must be initialized to 0 at the and the instance variable of worker ID must be -1 if no worker ID is provided as an argument. Okay, so if I don't give a worker ID, if I don't provide a worker ID, why does it just look spelled wrong? Then the hard working level is 0 and worker ID must be -1. So how many constructors do we have? Why do you say 2? 2, it's the right answer. 2 is the right answer. One for that has, okay, hand up. You can speak. Okay, no one's talking. So won't it be a multiple of IDs of -1 for the work ID? Now there's going to be a few worker IDs with -1. Okay, your hand's still up. Do you have a question? If you have, you're welcome to turn your microphone on and ask. Let's draw the UML for this. One more. Okay, someone else put their hand up. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if you're going to put your hand up, please do ask questions. Also, just we end up waiting for no reason. So if you want to ask questions, I have no objection. You're welcome to ask questions, but please then ask. If not, type. So let's work through a class diagram. And I'm going to open up a Word document for this. And I'll put that there so we can see both of them. Insert table 3. So it's a CANT. Correct. Your voice is not working. Okay, so your microphone's a bit on the buzz. There's two constructors. One that'll accept 2 parameters, one will accept 3 parameters. There is another way to do it. We'll teach you later. It's an additional command that we can teach you, but that wouldn't actually apply for this one. So let's just work through the instance variables. What instance variables does the ANT have? Come on, ladies and gentlemen. I know it's early in the morning. Worker ID, good. Weight. Worker. Weight. Hard worker work level. Anything else? What else does it have? That's an instance variable. We've got all of them except one. ID record, good. ID record. And this isn't just a normal instance variable. It's a what type of instance variable? Shared, excellent. It's a shared instance variable. Okay, that's the instance variables for the end. Then we go across and we have constructor, which is CANT, and it's going to accept the following. It's going to have let's go down. The slides are on Eve if you want to download them, if it's a bit hard to see. I have put them on Eve already. Worker ID, integer, weight, integer, and hard worker level, integer. So what does shared do? Shared creates a class level variable. So you'll notice that some of the code talks about object level and class level. Shared is a class level. It's a shared piece of the memory with all the objects. So it's not restricted to one object. All objects have this access to the same piece of information at the same time. So if you think of like the weight, each ant will have its own weight, but all the ants will have the same ID record. Okay, so it exists within the class. The objects can use it, but they can't really. It doesn't really belong to a specific object. It belongs to all the objects. If that helps with explanation, it allows for things to be called on a different level, and I'll show you that in code hopefully in a few minutes. Then your CAnt, it doesn't have a worker ID. It has a hard worker. Has weight, got integer, and we're gonna have. We need to have the hard worker. Look at the question again. The corresponding instance variables of hard worker level property must be set to instance of 0, and the instance variable of worker ID must be -1 if no worker ID is provided as an argument. So we actually just need weight. Everyone okay with that? Any things I'm not doing it correctly? Ladies and gentlemen, bear in mind, I'm doing the tutorial with you. I haven't done this TUT before. Yeah, I haven't gone and sat yesterday and coded this TUT out. I'm solving it with you right now. So if you see something I'm making, you don't think I'm right on, tell me so we can discuss it. Hello? So look at the mic on. Okay. So if we read the question again, it says the corresponding instance variables of hard worker level and the worker ID must be -1 if no worker ID argument is provided. So technically we could have this as well. But I don't see the point because we're told to set it. Because it says if a worker ID is provided, we go with this approach. If no worker ID, we go with this approach. So we have two constructors to handle the situation. Remember, you can have more than one constructor to handle different situations. So if I don't know the worker ID, I go and throw it into a -1 category. Okay. It's going to have a property methods. And it's going to have worker ID integer read only. I have weight. Second constructor is to handle a situation where we don't know the worker ID. That's what's specified by the question. And then we have methods. And the methods we have are determine work ethic, and it must return a random value between 1 and 10, so integer. Is this a public or private? Is it a utility method or is it a public method? What I Okay. Okay, for those who just joined the shared, because this is a shared value, it's going to be used to stack or track the IDs. The two constructors, one's to handle if we know the worker ID, and one if we don't. It's not a matter of whether we know it or not. We're providing the option to have a situation where we can handle we know it or we don't know it. Okay. Because based on the question, I also think it's private. Gather food, I think is, I'd say gather food is public. And it returns also an integer, as everything else works with integers. Then we have the last one, which is a public get next ID. It's going to be an integer. It's also going to be shared because it's a class level. Yeah, we don't show we don't show everything to the people outside. Okay, is everyone okay with this? Any questions about this? Okay, besides the two constructors, I know that some of you are getting a bit confused there. The two constructors is there to allow the person to either they know the work ID or not. Why is the first method private? Well, that's the Reddit. It's going to return a random value between 1 and 10. It's going to be used in gather food. So it doesn't seem to be a public variable or property. It doesn't seem to be a public method per se. The calculation doesn't seem to go to a public method. It's more of a private method inside gather food. Okay, let's just also read the rest of the questions so we are on the right track as well. I agree with Mr. Van der Stazen. I wouldn't use that outside the class. Let's just look at the rest and we can come back to it. Because once we finish an ant, we have to make a colony name, number of ants, working hours, duration of operation, food reserves. Okay, and colony is a readable only. Number of ants, hard working hours, how long they work today, day in operation, integer value declaring how many days a colony has been around for. Food reserves, a double value representing the number of food units gathered by the worker ants and so forth. So name. Now I'll see if it comes up in the slides and then I'll ask you a question. Working hours, duration, these are all pretty straightforward input information. Okay. In addition, the property method and utility methods must be generated for the NC colony. New colony name is string, number of ants is integer, number of days is integer, working hours is integer. Set the colony name, number of ants, the number of days that the ant colony has been in operation, as well as the number of working hours. All CAnt objects must be initialized within the constructor using generate ant function. Okay. Generate weight. Okay, now this is important. Returns a random integer value between 1 and 15. This function is used to generate the random value for each ant. Generate hard worker level. Returns a random value to determine the how How hard an AND object should work. See AND details. Generate worker chance. Returns a Boolean true if random generated between 1 and 100. Otherwise, divided by 10. Returns false. Generate worker chance. Generate AND. Generate AND randomly generates and returns an AND object. New AND objects have a 1 in 10 chance that it's not a hard-working AND. So if it's decided that CN should not be a worker AND, it must obtain a worker ID. Otherwise, okay, yes. Okay, I know I'm reading a bit fast there. So let's look at this again. These are our instance variables. This is our constructor. Now it's important to understand what's going into the constructor. Name, number of ants. We set the values and we call this generate ant function. Generate weight is going to return a random value between 1 and 10 as a weight. Generate hard worker level will generate a random value between returns an integer value to determine how hard an ant object should work. See ant. Okay, so 1 to 10. And this generates a random value between 1 and 10. Generate worker chance. Returns a Boolean value true if a random generated value between 1 is divisible by 10, otherwise returns false. And then generate ant. Now, this is where part of a trick to the question lies. Generate a worker chance. Now, in an ant colony, this is now not off topic, but where this question really relates to. In an ant colony, are there only food gathering ants? I'll test you guys on your knowledge of general. No. Okay. So what's happening here is we're going to have to randomly generate if there's a worker ant or not, because there could be a soldier ant or a nursing ant, depends on the situation. So they're not all going to be food gatherers. So we'll generate a chance. So that's where the second constructor comes in. Because if it's not a working ant, it doesn't get a worker ID. Ooh, spelling. So if it's not a worker ant, we use this constructor. If it is a worker ant, we use this constructor. And that's based on generate worker ID, a worker chance. Now we have another function, generate ant. Randomly generates and returns a CAnt object. The new CAnt object has a 1 in 10 chance that it's not a worker ant. If it's decided that the CAnt should be a worker ant, it needs to obtain a worker ID. Otherwise, the worker ID must be null value. Make sure of the above 3 generated functions to automatically generate values for the instantiation of the CAnt object. Crack whoop invokes gather food in all the ants, and the results are added to the food reserves. Gather food invokes the following. Okay, if an ant is not a hard worker, ant ID is okay. Gather returns a string of the following. Yes, there's still be an evening tut today, don't worry. This is not a straightforward practical. There's a lot of nitty-gritty parts of it. It's to show you all the aspects we have inside composition and what we've taught up until now. So there's lots of parts to it. If an ant is not an ant, worker ant, and is not a worker ant, it does nothing. If the worker ant will bring back and return gather food units of the food. So you'll invoke a food gathering, gather food. Okay, you joined a bit late. I think it's at 5:10. Thank you. Invokes food gather of each ant object for the number of days in the colony operation, taking into consideration that CAnt objects gather food every day and every hour. Results are added to the food reserves variable. Return a multi-line string which describes each gather food invocation as following. I think there's a typo here because this should be gather food. Gather returns the following details of the activity of the colony. There's two different gathers. Again, finally, there's a maximum calculation. Okay, let's do the constructor for this, and then let's start the code. Everyone okay with this? I know it's a bit of a obscure practical in terms of question or tutorial, but it is a nice one in terms of it kind of brings everything together, read only, write only, shared. So it's just trying to grasp the idea of what's going on. And this is where design is especially important. This type of practical is where a design is essential. If you dive head first into the coding of this, it's not going to go well. Okay? In these type of questions, a design is more important to start off with. That's why I'm doing the UML, so I can at least have an idea of where I'm going. I can work out, okay, what's read only, what's write only, how to work certain things, how to get certain things in play. So it's important to keep that in mind as well. So there's our CAnt. Let's do our colony. Yeah, Mr. Vanessa also agrees that. Thought so. Wait only. Okay. So let's head up the next object, C colony. The C colony. Okay, and it has a colony name string as number of ants. It has ants as a CAnt. It has work hours. Oh, wait a minute, mistake. It's read only, yes, but that's the property method. Remember, I'm doing the instance variables right now, not 8. Yeah. You are correct. It's a read only, but the property method is read only. Remember, these are all private, so no one can access these. Days in operation. Integer. The last one, food reserves. Okay, we'll draw the diamond in a few seconds. It's got to be done as well. Right now, let's focus on the UML constructor. This is going to be a C colony, and it's going to accept the following. Colony name. Oh. String num ants as integer. It's going to also have num days integer, and then work hours integer. Okay. It's going to have property for colony name. This is a string, and it, yes, as someone mentioned, is read only. Okay. We're going to have number of ants Should this be a read only? Or would it also just be a general? Ants as yeah. Okay. Then I have worker hours. I have days in operation. I have food reserves. Oh yeah, you're right. It should be an integer. But should it be read only or write only, or is it just a normal property method? Now here we have a lot of extra things. Generate, weight, integer. Generate, hard worker level, integer. We have generate worker chance. We have generate ant. And cant. We have crack whoop. We have gather food. This is a void. And we have gather. How do we know the method is public or private? How it's being used. Do I want the person who's going to use this program to generate the weight? Ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Do I want them to generate whether we have a worker ant or not? Remember, with abstraction and encapsulation, the idea is we want to only expose what is needed. So we don't really need to expose generate weight, generate worker chance, generate ant. That's something that the class is going to do. The crack, the whip, gather the food, and gather, that we're going to let the person in the form interact with, but the rest no. So we got to figure. It's more about do we want the person to actually use it or not. In this case, I don't see the reason for the person to actually say, okay, I'm going to generate the weight, the hard worker, the worker chance, and ant. That's something that the class will do. It's something that is hidden away, obscured from the person's perspective. Everyone okay with that? I know it first off it looks a bit confusing. And honestly, it is a bit confusing in the first take, but this is why it's important to read through a question and break it up. Instead of diving headlong into it, we are trying to work out what it is, and also no, no, that's fine. Okay. Okay. So we have to. Okay. So everyone remembers. Everyone okay with why the diamond is where it is now? Okay. Remember composition. Okay. Can a colony exist without ants? Can an ant exist without a colony? Okay, that's why the diamond is on colony. Colony has to have ants. An ant doesn't have to have a colony. Also, a colony has ants. Colony has a. There's the has a relationship between the two. An ant doesn't have a colony. An ant is part of a colony. A colony has ants. So the composition, you always test the has a. So colony has ants. Ants doesn't really have colony. So this is the has a relationship. Colony has ants. So the diamond is on colony. Everyone okay with this so far? I know some of you are a bit confused with the constructors and why some are private. I understand that. But remember, we've got to look at it from the perspective of we want to limit the person's accessibility and abstraction of the work. So we only want to give them access to what is essential to them. We don't want to give everything accessible. Okay? The methods. Out of the methods, does a person need to work with these methods? Do they need to work with generate weight, ID, generate ant? Do they actually need to work with these methods in the form? No. Okay, good. I see some of you are with me there. The same is here. We need to have a balance between what the person can see and what is what a person can see and what a person can access is also a fundamental thing here. We need to have control over that. Okay. But is everyone okay on how I did the UML, the diagrams? Any question on the UML side? No questions at all. Okay. So is everyone happy with this? Does it make sense? Okay. Legend, I don't expect you guys to say yes and everyone get it automatically. I know some of you are going to get confused by this and you need to go through it again. This is why this thing's also being recorded, so you can go through it a few times. The notes are on Eve. It's fine if you don't get it the first time around. Okay. This is the first time you've been exposed to a question like this as well, so it's important to understand the different components. Remember, this thing isn't testing just your ability to write code. It's testing your ability to um, uh, put things together in a correct, mechanism, almost, to figure out what's private and public yourself, because we can't really always tell you. How do we know when to use read-only and write-only properties without being told, as in this example? Good question. You won't really know. It's really your decision. Here we tell you because we want it to be done in a certain way. But if I didn't tell you, I think that comes with experience, to be honest. Right now, we'll tell you when to make things read only, write only. But later on, it's up to you. It'll come with the experience and how secure you want the system to be. Do you want people messing with it? I think it'll make a bit more sense in informatics too when you guys do databases, what you want people meddling with, what you people don't want meddling with it. So just keep that in mind as well. Okay, Ms. Van der West says in comment, you would it be used outside of the class or only inside the class? Is a very good statement there in terms of public, private as well. So certain things are read only, certain things are write only based on how your security is set up. Security is something you can't build in after, you build in the beginning. Put it this way, when you open a bank account, can you change your bank account number afterwards? Okay. So the property for a bank account would be what? Read only or write only or just a normal property? Read only. Your ID, is that read only? Okay, so some things, your ID write only. I don't know about that. I think it's more read only. But in a computer system, would you allow the person to change their ID? What if you made a mistake when you entered it? Okay, so there's different IDs also. You also get IDs for storing information, IDs for a person. Not always the same thing. So it's with experience you learn to know what is read and write only. Right now, we're trying to teach you what the tools are. So when you get to a point when you got to decide, you know, kind of, okay, I have these tools in my background. How do I apply it? Can I apply it here? Does it make sense here? So it's more about, okay, you have the tools, you just don't know when to use them yet, which is fine. That comes with experience. It's not something you're going to just wake up one day and say, okay, yes, I know when to use it. It comes with experience and when you want people meddling with your code or not meddling with your code, put it that way. Any other questions about the question or the UML? Why is the colony read-only? Doesn't the user need to enter the name? Yes, but when do they do it? Yeah, I know you want to go to the VB code. But ladies and gentlemen, a lot of you have the bad habit, and it's the same with me occasionally. Instead of doing a design, you jump straight into the code, and that doesn't work. You need to make sure you understand the question, understand what you need to do, and then jump into the code. Okay, it's important to understand how that balances out. It's not just about, okay, dive into the code and try to get it to work. You need to understand, okay, what do I need to do? How do these all fit together? And then jump into the code. So always be careful of that. Let's just create a new project. What is it called? Tutorial 5. Okay. Let's have a look at the VB code. I don't know if we're going to get to implement the whole thing in the form at least, but we'll try to see as far as we can go. So from here, now I notice some people have been creating their forms slightly like the code slightly bizarre with their classes. Remember, you right click on the name of your project and you go add. Some of you are adding it into a place that not really normally visible. So this is a cant.vb. Okay, so we have option. Infer. I'm going to have my Word document open up next to me so I know what I'm typing. So it has a private worker ID, has a private weight, has a private hard worker level. So I'm doing UML in my code now. Has a private shared ID record as integer. That starts at 99. Hopefully that is the correct way and that won't break the code later on. Why 99? Because remember the ant IDs, worker ant IDs are 100 going upwards. So the ID record must start at 99 and then work upwards. Okay. Now we're going to have private, sorry, not private, public sub new that accepts a worker ID as integer, weight as integer, as hard worker level as integer. So the worker ID equals worker ID. The weight equals weight. And the hard worker level equals hard worker level. In the second one, this is for a non-worker ant, because we have worker ant and non-worker ant. It just has a weight as an integer. The worker ID is set to -1. The hard work, okay, my spelling's bad, that's why it's not helping. Hard worker level is 0, and the weight is equal to weight. So that's the two constructors. This is when we have a worker ant. This is when we don't have a worker ant. Is that okay, ladies and gentlemen? Okay. That's basically what the two constructors are for. One is for when we have a worker ant, one is when we don't have a worker ant. Then we have our public properties, public property, that's a long question, I'll have to come back to it. As integer get no worker ID. Public property weight as integer get return weight equals value. Public property hard worker level get return. I seem to be doing a bit weird today with my coding skills. Get return and that's our property methods. Work ID is that. Then we have our methods. Okay, let's go to the questions quickly. Can I okay, Mr. van der Wes hasn't answered that one. Doesn't the second constructor have two methods? Doesn't the second constructor have two methods? No. No. It has one parameter. I know my UML, even my UML, I changed it. After reading the colony, it made more sense just to have the weight. Okay, then we need, because we are told what the other values are, we have a private function determine work ethic as integer. Who remembers how to generate random numbers? I hear Google opening. An object of random. The better way to do this. Yeah, we'll keep this for now. So we have dim R&D as random. R&D equals new random randomize. We need a dim int value as integer, int value equals rnd dot reserves rnd dot next 1,10. Turn. Now the question, now the statement is, where is it? Returns the ants hard level divided by a random number between 1 and 10. So return hard worker level divided by int value. That's going to be a double. Okay, and then we need to get a public function gather food integer. I think it's integer. Might be double now I'm looking at it, but we'll see the calculation. And it is the following. Gather food returns the amount of food gathered by an ant. Ants are able to carry 7 times their weight. The amount of food they gather is determined by how much they can carry, multiplied by their work ethic. So return weight times, what is it? Times determine work ethic times 7. Makes us a double. Oh, what? Remember, I needed a random value between 1 and 10. The question says, return a hard, determine ethic, determine work ethic, returns ants hard worker level divided by a random value between 1 and 10. Why did we initialize? Do I need to use random? Okay, so that's an ant done. Wait, no, we're missing something. Ant has a public shared function get next ID as integer ID actually guys, well, you're not taught how to do random in first semester. I'm saying generate a random, what? Oh, good grief. No, okay, my bad. My assumption was that you were taught how to do random values in the first semester. Okay, never mind. Let me explain what the hell I've done. Okay, because that's going to be a freaking spin in the works. Okay, R&D is a random object. There's an object called random inside VB that'll generate a random value for you. That's the one thing. Randomize forces it to generate a new number. If you don't randomize, it'll generate the same number every time. VB is funny like that. So I instantiate the random object. So I obtain the random. Then I say, get the next random value between 1 and 10. So it'll generate a value between 1 and 10 by randomizing. So rnd.next says find a value, pick a random value between 1 and 10. It's upper bound, lower bound, and upper bound. So this will generate a random value between 1 and 10 by using the next functionality. So again, randomize forces new random number. This will generate random number between 1 and 10. 1 and 10 is also included if I remember correctly. Might have changed, but it should generate a value between 1 and 10. Let's just check the... Yeah, it does do it. Yeah. So it includes 1 and 10. So this will generate a value between 1 and 10 and store it inside int value. Then I divide the hard worker level by the int value, and that'll be my random number I've just generated. So every time I run determine ethics, it'll generate a new random number. Does that make a bit more sense, ladies and gentlemen? I do apologize. I was under the assumption that you knew randomize from first semester, because that's something that's normally taught in Informatics 1A. So it's something that's I just assumed you knew. So randomize is a keyword to, again, force a new random number every time the function is invoked. This is an object of type random, and I'm invoking the next functionality, which will generate a random integer between 1 and 10. You can also do random doubles and random bytes, but we're going with random integers. Randomizing is similar to seeding in computer science, yes. But no, because you actually can pass a seed inside the object. So randomize, it's just a keyword inside VB. It's nothing to do with seeding. There sometimes happens if you don't have the randomized keyword, it'll generate the same random number value again and again and again and again. So it's just to force the system not to generate the same random value, regardless of the seed or not. The seed, you could do time, and that will also help. For those who are wondering what the hell do I mean by seed, when generating random values, trying to generate as true random as possible, we use a seed, a random seed. So you can use like the time of day. Okay. If you guys are okay with that, we'll come back to this if need be. But we finished with the ant colony, or the ant. Let's move on with colony. Add new class. C colony. Okay. And here we have quite a bit to declare. Private colony name as string. Private number of ants. We have private ants. What I got array? Yes, I'm not thinking clearly this morning, ladies and gentlemen. As you see, I'm writing random code for no specific reason. And then we need work hours. Days in operation. Again, I'm not thinking very clearly this morning, I see. Food reserves integer. Okay. Now we need to create our constructor. I'm going to do the outer structure and then I'll do the other functionality because that's needed before we can get through all of this. Colony name as string. Food reserves is a double, I think so as well. Colony name, num_ants. Oh, that's how I did it. I started with the ants and then I worked my way out. So now I'm doing for the colony. What am I missing? Okay. I'm going to come back to the constructor because we need some other things in place first. Okay, I'm going to quickly do the property methods. If you've got any questions, post it and I'll see if I can answer why I'm writing out the property methods. Public property ants as integer return ants a public property public property. This is now work hours as integer get return work hours equals value. Public property days in operation integer get return days in operation equals value. Almost finished. Public property food reserves get, and we get, why I keep doing that, return reserves, food reserves equals value. Now we're going to do the methods, and we're going to go back to the constructor, because without the methods, it's going to be very difficult to actually get the constructor to work. Because if you remember, each method, like the get weight, get hard worker, generate this, generate and, all are designed to create your and. So it's important to keep that in mind while generating. So I'm going to move this off screen so I can see it while I'm writing the code as well. So let's start with, I wonder if I can do randomize. Haha, now I can do something a bit more interesting. Let me private function gen random number lower as integer, upper as integer, as integer. Okay. So we have randomize. We have dim RND as new, as random. RND equals new random. Return RND dot next lower comma upper. Yeah. So private function generate weight as integer will return, this is the nice part, generate random number between 1 and 15. Private function generate hard worker as integer. So you also set slides dictated to random. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Oh, I'll set up slides for random, yeah. I'll get some slides on random values for you. Okay. And the hard worker level is between 1 and 10. So return generate number between 1 and 10. And then I'm going to go and say private function. I'll come back to your question. I can't actually see it right now. Function and this is going to be as boolean. Okay. And the question says return boolean value true if random generated value between 1 and 100 is divisible by 10. So we got chance as integer. Chance equals generate random value between 1 and 100. How do we determine if it's divisible by 10? How do you know if the random value is divisible? There we go. Good, good. If chance mod 10 equals 0, then return true, else return false. Everyone okay with that? Okay. Then we need to have our private function generate ant as cant. Now here we say if generate chance equals true, then else. If it is true, we get a dim ID. We get a dim, what is it? Weight and hard worker level as integer. ID equals. Now this is important. Where do I get the ID from? You don't remember. Where do I get the ID from? I think I'm starting to run out of time as well. Ladies and gentlemen, where do we get ID from? Shared variable, excellent. How do we access the shared variable? You're correct saying it's a shared variable. How do we access it though? Come on. Class name.variable, there we go. Cant dot get next ID. Okay, weight equals generate weight. Hard worker level equals generate hard worker level. And then we go and say return new cant. And we give it ID, weight, and hard worker level. Else we get dim weight as integer. Weight equals generate weight. Return new cant, and we pass it the weight. We're okay with that. So this will generate all the ants for us. It'll generate a worker ant. So if it is a worker ant, and if it is not a worker ant. So it'll generate the ants for us. We don't have to worry about that. Okay, so let's now go do the constructor, because now we can actually start doing the rest of it. So first off, colony name equals colony name. We redim our ants to num ants. We also set the variable number ants equals num ants. Now for a as integer equals 1 to underscore num ants. We go and see that ants a equals generate ant. Okay, num days in operation is equal to num days. Then we have working hours. So work hours equals work How's it spelled? Work hours. On. Work with me. Work hours. Is everyone okay with the constructor? No. Okay. So let's see what it's doing. So first off, we get colony name. We set colony name equal colony name. We get the number of ants. We set it the variable. We renum the array. Everyone okay with up until there so far? Okay. Now, I'm guessing you're all confused by this. Okay. Remember, what's happening here is I've resized the array. Now I'm going for each ant, go and generate the ant, which calls this function. So this function, because generate ant will return a new ant. Generate ant will create an ant for us. It'll generate a random, it'll get an ID from the shared, it'll generate a random weight, it'll generate hard worker level randomly. Based on those three, it'll create a worker ant. If it is not a worker ant, it'll just create an ant with a weight. So this function is designed to create the objects for us. So every time we call generate ant, it creates a new object of type ant, be it a worker ant or just a normal ant. So this section of code is essential because it creates our ants. We're not going to ask the user for the weight and the worker level. That's generated for the code, in the code. So the code itself will generate the answers. It'll generate the weight and the level. It'll get the ID from the shared variable and pass this across into the ant array. So the generate ant function creates new ant objects. On line 105 and 110, these create a new ant object, and that passes it through to the array. Does that make more sense? Okay, hopefully. Does my ant? Yeah. Okay, everyone okay up until here so far? Remember, what I did do is I created a generic generate random number. So inside these, I'm just invoking the generate random number. Chance of getting a worker, 1 to 10. If it's divided by 10, we get a worker, else false, we don't get a worker and based on the chance of getting a worker ant or not, we get a worker ant or not. And a worker ant always gets an ID and a worker level. So that information is created by the function. The function then passes it through to the array of ants and stores it inside the array of ants. So every time we run this command, we create a new object type ant and give it into the array. So we don't know how many worker ants we have or non-worker ants we have. It's all randomized. Hopefully that's okay. I don't know how much time we have left. I'm going to see if we can still finish off the last two functions. Crack whoop invokes the generate food function each ant for the number of days in the colony operation. Take consideration the CN object gathers food every work hour each day. The results are added to food reserves. I return a multi-line string that describes each. Okay, I'm not sure what that means. Okay, but that's one we're working on. So when we say crack whip, I'm assuming crack whip is going to be public. It's going to be a sub, no, each. Okay, I'm just reading this again because there's two ways to interpret this question right now. Because gather food, I just want to see something. See above, okay, that's fine. I'm looking at this one. Okay, this is not a straightforward question as you guys may think. Okay, let's try to do the best we can with the time we have left. I'm going to go with a subroutine for now. Might be wrong. Whoop. I do know I'm running out of time. It's for the best days, and how much time do we have left? Crack whip. For A as equals 1 to ends. Each ant. Okay. Okay, so if I understand it correctly, food reserves is equal plus equals ants A dot gather food times days in operation times work hours. If I understand the question correctly. I think we have like a minute left until this lecture is actually finished. Okay, and the result is added to food reserves variable. Returns a multi-line string that describes each gather food invocation. Okay. As string. You're going to get a bit confused. I'll try to explain this one as quick as I can, and then them and as C and equals and S. I don't need that. Why am I doing that? I need them food gathered as double food gathered equals and A dot gather food. Okay. Food gathered. And this is where it's going to get a bit weird. Temp display as string equals nothing. Display joining okay. This is where design becomes so important. ID equals -1, then display equals. I'll explain what I'm doing now, so to make sure I've got it correctly in my head, because this one is a little bit, as you can see, around the about question. I'll explain exactly what I'm doing in a second, ladies and gentlemen. Do not panic. Do not freak out, at least. Just bear with me. And got ID I'm only using stuff you guys should have been taught. Okay. Oddly enough, I've just used stuff that you should have been taught. The and plus is the same as plus equals. Not taught. Okay. Let me explain what I'm doing. So I have the function. Let's look at the question quickly. We're going to go over time slightly. I know that. The crack whip invokes gather food function for each ant object for the number of days in the colony has been operation. Take into consideration that the C ant object gathers food every work hour each day. The result are added to food reserve variable. Return a multi-string that describes each gather food invocation as follows. If the ant is a worker, say this. If the ant is a worker, say the following. Okay, so it's saying for each ant, find out how much food it gathered, and add it to food reserves. But also go and say, give me details of what's happening every time it runs. So what I've done is I've got a temporary string that's empty. I go through each ant. I have a dim food gathering because I've got to keep in mind I can't just invoke it. No, I can invoke it. It's not random. No, it is slightly randomized. I just want to see if the gather food is randomized. Yeah, the gather food is random because the determine work ethic, so we can't have to call it once. So I gather the food by saying ant A gather food, and I store it inside the food gathering variable. Then for each ant, I have to add it to the food reserves. The amount of gathered to days times the hour, because for every hour they gather so much food, and every hour of every day. So that's where that calculation comes in. You guys okay with that line? I just want to see where I've lost you and I haven't lost you. Is it okay until that line? Ladies and gentlemen? Okay. I'll upload a PDF of this, yeah. So what I'm doing here, this is actually quite easy compared to everything else. How do I know if a worker ant is a worker or not? What tells me if an ant is a worker or not? The ID, the -1. So if I have a worker ant and its ID is -1, it's not a worker. So therefore I display not worker. If it isn't -1, it is a worker, then I invoke this display, which then displays this. What I'm doing here is I'm conjoining the strings. So I'm saying take the display. Ooh, I forgot something. To get a new line, because these must be on separate lines. Okay, what's happened now? No, it's not the same as a message box, in the sense that it's not going to, it'll display to a text box. I'm trying to see why it's giving me errors now suddenly. And where do the errors start? That's the question. In class, oh, had a double quotation in the wrong spot. So this is just telling me if I've got a worker ant or not, and display the corresponding message. Then take that message, put it inside the temporary string variable, and at the end I need to return the display. So then can display in a text box. Now you can do that. Remember, I'm not dictating where you display the information. I'm just sending information back for display. The form will decide if it gets displayed in a text box or where it gets displayed. That's not my decision when I'm writing the class. The class must just be designed to do what it needs to do. If it's got to display something, it says it's going to display, but the UI, the form will just decide how it displays. The form will decide when you're coding the form. You can either display it into a text box or whatever you like, but generally I would use a multi-line text box for this. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we've gone over time. I don't want to keep you guys online for much longer as it is chewing up everyone's data. Is everyone okay with the UML diagrams we've done? Not really. Why are you unclear on the UML diagrams? String. Okay, the food doesn't exist. Oh, display. Is everyone okay with the fact that you can say display equals display and another statement? So the same as total equals total plus. I'm joining sentences. I'm doing the same thing with a display. I'm saying display plus. And then I'm adding that to the display. What I'll do is once Mr. van der Westhuizen's finished his tutorial tonight, I'll upload the code for the two classes. And you guys can have a look at them then. But I'm going to upload it in a locked PDF format so you can't copy and paste. Okay. And as you don't, if need be, we'll come back to composition on Thursday's tutorial as well. We'll come back and do a bit more composition if we need. But tomorrow, I'm going to start with the inheritance if possible. But we'll see how it goes. Composition. Is everyone okay with what composition is? Okay, you guys are bouncing quickly. Okay. For those watching the recording later on as well, if you have problems with composition, please let us know in Discord, so we know on Thursday to focus on composition as well again. But I'll try to see if I can finish off the form as well and upload all the code so you can see how it kind of fits together. Because the form does really very little in this code. But that'll be it for the recording. I'm going to stop it now. And any questions, again, you can post them on Discord or you can post them on YouTube. I'll check the comments there as well.